Welcome to AstraZeneca. AstraZeneca is an international pharmaceutical company. The site of Dunkirk is becoming one of the main production sites of AstraZeneca. We manufacture medicines to treat asthma and other respiratory diseases. The plan to extend the plant on which you are going to work is to prepare for the launch of new drugs. It is therefore essential that these new installations comply with high quality standards and be delivered on time. Safety is one of the priorities of AstraZeneca, regardless of the work or actions that you carry out on the site. Be careful and act safely. Our priority is that you can leave in the evening in the same condition as when you arrived in the morning. On behalf of AstraZeneca, I thank you for the professionalism that you will show on this site. As project director, I am of course concerned about the project's execution. But I have one subject which, for myself, for Technip FMC, as well as for my team, my first concern above any other: safety. It could not be considered that anything goes before your safety. I absolutely want to be sure that you can go back home every evening and at the end of your working here without any accident. Your safety and your health are the first priority. To help achieve this target, we have health and safety coordinators. Their mission is to ensure that you are working safely. When they intervene, they are doing it on my behalf, by delegation. They are my representatives, and their words are my words. Safety is a priority to us all. Technip FMC and its management commit to consider health and safety as the absolute priority. First of all, hello to everyone. I want to introduce myself. I'm Daniel Clayson, Director of the site Everest AstraZeneca in Dunkirk. I would like to wish you all welcome. For Technip FMC, AstraZeneca and all of our colleagues, the priority is safety first on our site. And we ask all of our subcontractors and their teams to adhere completely to this. All the personnel present on site must act responsibly, and this must not be seen as the sole responsibility of the HSE representatives, but of us all. Everyone must ensure their own safety, but they must also make sure that their colleagues are doing the same, and they must not hesitate to point out anything that they see anybody is doing wrong or putting the safety of others at risk. Our master word must be health and safety is the business of all.
We all must see ourselves as safety leaders, regardless of our job title and responsibilities. Therefore, if you see anything which is unsafe, make sure you report it to your supervisor.
Technip, as the main contractor for the Everest site, is responsible for welcoming all visitors and explaining the rules related to health and safety. The project involves the construction of 3 buildings. The site is limited by a fence, and this fence is used to separate the risks of the plant from the risks specific to the construction site. As a result, this fence must never be crossed. Entrance and exit to the site is exclusively through the gate next to the guard post. The site is divided into 2 zones, an office area and a construction area. This division allows visitors and employees access to the offices without being obliged to carry the mandatory PPE. It also acts as a way of separating vehicle traffic from pedestrians. Access to the site. Permanent workers must apply for an access badge. This is given to them after having received an induction to health and safety. For short-term visitors, a permanent worker from the site will act as the host, and they will accompany the visitor and ensure their safety, meeting at the security post. There are also special rules for the access of delivery trucks or for occasional services such as repair and maintenance of plant, for example. The opening hours of the construction site are from 0600 hours to 2000 hours. It is possible to deviate from this schedule by requesting written authorisation from the site management. Requests for an overnight pass must be made during the daytime. For permission to work on Saturdays, a request must be made Thursday morning at the latest. For safety's sake, it is advised that no one works alone on the job site. In the case of machinery and vehicles which are intended to remain permanently on the site, the entry procedure shall include a check on the condition of the vehicle or the equipment for good operation and maintenance, and, where required by regulation, a note must be made of the periodic inspection. Workers at the construction site must park their vehicles in the car park reserved for the Everest site and not use the car parks reserved for staff. There is a temporary parking lot for heavy vehicles. Workers must use the car parks with consideration and not park in front of the temporary buildings or gate whilst awaiting permission to access the site. Heavy goods vehicles are also asked not to drive in front of the main entrance, but to use the designated area behind the staff car park. Vehicle traffic within the site is limited. No visitor's vehicle is allowed without special permission, and even then, only one vehicle per company will be authorised for a limited period for the unloading of the materials and equipment. Access permission is to be requested at the guard post. For loading or unloading of a truck, the driver must report to the guard post. It must be greeted and guided by an AZ representative who is a permanent member of staff and who is responsible for the safety of the loading or unloading operation. This host must guide the vehicle at all times. Access to the work area is at the turnstile located after the welfare rooms. Meals cannot be eaten on site. The designated rooms must be used for this purpose. It is also forbidden to smoke on site, in the works zone and in the office area, except in the two areas reserved for smokers, which are behind the offices of the supervisor and after the turnstile access to the work area. Emergency plan. Our neighbouring site belongs to Minichem, which is an industry known as Seveso 2 high threshold, where there is a risk of the emission of toxic gas. The Everest site is located in the hazardous area, which could be affected by the release of this toxic gas. Site visitors are consequently at risk and must be equipped with a leakage mask. It must be carried at all times and worn as soon as the alarm is triggered. When an alarm is raised, after the mask has been put on, people working at height must descend to ground level, 0 metres, and go to the assembly point next to the guard post. The second part of the contingency plan concerns an event that has occurred on the site. In the event of an accident, the first person on the scene must protect the area, give the alarm and call a first aider on site, or if necessary, provide first aid if he is so trained. In the case of an alarm, the external emergency services must be called immediately by dialling 18. Next, the supervisory post and the site supervisor of the main contractor must be informed. In the event of a fire, the same procedure applies. The first action is to use a fire extinguisher to contain the fire. If the fire cannot be controlled, the external services must be called by dialling 18 and informing the guard post. In the event of anyone feeling unwell, emergency medical services can be called by dialling 15. An automatic defibrillator is also available on the ground floor of the TechNIP offices. It is usable by all, however it's advised to call a designated first aider as soon as possible in case CPR is needed. Changing rooms are available for staff as well as dining rooms and welfare facilities. Waste bins are provided for sorting wood, scrap metal and other non-hazardous waste. For chemical waste such as paint or aerosol, dedicated containers are available. The main risks to be considered during a site visit are machinery traffic. Visitors should keep a reasonable distance from all vehicles and machinery. Access to excavations. Only use the provided ramps and access stairs. Pay attention to barriers and reservation areas on floors as well as tripping hazards. Falling objects. Take care not to drop anything and be aware of those working above you. Falls from height. Make sure barriers are in place and wear a harness when working at height. Spraying of materials. Be aware of splashes such as concrete and any dangers from hot works. The main safety objective is to have zero accidents and zero harm to people, whether it be a visitor or a permanent worker on the site, and zero harm to the environment. To achieve this goal, the following behaviours are expected. Ensure that the workstation is free of any debris and clean. Keep it in an orderly manner and perform daily cleaning of the workstation. Always ensure cables are neat and, if possible, suspended above ground. Observe the collective and individual protective measures described. Use materials, tools, equipment and methods appropriate to the work to be performed. Ensure that the PPE is in good condition and appropriate to the task. Report any concerns regarding installations, equipment or machinery immediately to the team leader or supervisor. Take care of your own safety and that of others around you if you see them doing something wrong. Don't be shy, tell them. Make sure you always have the correct work permit and do not take risks. Participate and voice concerns actively in the meetings at the start of each day. Follow all health and safety rules at all times and encourage others to do the same. Report any hazardous situations to the team leader, work supervisor or safety coordinator. Do not endorse any behaviour contrary to the safety rules. In the case of injury, accident or incident, immediately report it to your team leader, work supervisor or safety coordinator. Regularly familiarise yourself with the latest safety procedures. Under no circumstances should an operator remove or modify any device or equipment contributing directly or indirectly to safety without the written permission of the person in charge of the installation in question. Under no circumstances work on your own initiative or operate any machinery on the advice or instructions of any other person whatsoever unless you have received the correct training and you are authorised to do so. You will not be accused of having refused to act if you do not consider yourself as competent or did not possess the necessary authorisation to complete the task. Based on its experience, TechNIP has written 12 safety rules. These are in the form of 6 actions to always do and 6 actions to never do. Work permit system. Actions to always apply. Actions to always do. Rule number 1. All activities must be subject to a written work permit. This is requested by the person in charge of the team performing the work, validated by the HSE teams and signed by the supervisor to authorise the start of the work. This work permit is based on the following 3 elements. In the first place, a procedure must be established in advance by the applicant. Secondly, the applicant must establish a risk analysis defining the means of prevention to be implemented. And thirdly, this risk analysis and associated means of prevention must be explained to all those involved. A fire permit is required for all hotspot works on the site. Actions to always do. Rule number 2. Always to intervene when a dangerous act or a situation is observed. To do this, each worker must know the procedures and safety rules in force. If the intervention is not possible, the worker must notify his supervisor or a responsible person on the site. It's important to emphasise that any worker is also authorised to stop any dangerous activity, whether it's his own company or other companies working on the site. Actions to always do. Rule number 3. Access in confined space. A worker must not enter a confined space without authorisation. The areas affected by this will be communicated to the workforce as the project evolves. The operator must follow the safety procedures in place and confirm with their manager that the safety conditions are met before starting work, especially if gas tests are required. They must also check that the means of communication are in place so emergency measures, if necessary, can be taken. Actions to always do. Rule number 4. Always work with the personal protective equipment appropriate to the task. Mandatory are helmet, glasses, gloves, safety footwear and a high visibility vest or coat. On this site there is also a mandatory 6 PPE, which is the gas leakage mask that every operator must have at hand. These PPEs are the minimum required to go on to the site. There is also PPE to use depending on the work performed, such as harnesses against the risk of falling, dust masks, and an item that should be carried at all times is hearing protection for noisy areas. These PPEs are specified in the procedures and risk analyses. Each worker or visitor must seek information regarding these requirements. Actions to always do. Rule number 5. This concerns the rule of conduct. On the construction site, there are speed limits and rules of conduct in force, and you should always show respect for pedestrian and traffic lanes. Vehicles and plant must be properly maintained and in good working order. It is strictly forbidden to use your telephone whilst driving. Actions to always do. Rule number 6. Always use the right tools for the task. Each worker must check their tools and ensure they are appropriate, checking that they're in good working order before they start. Where appropriate, check that the tools have been inspected in accordance with current regulations and procedures. Any non-compliant tool must not be used. In no case should the guards on the tools and machines be removed or bypassed. Power tools must comply with CE standards, be properly maintained and in good working order. The electrical boxes must be equipped with differential circuit breakers and an emergency switch. Prohibition rule number 1. Never remove or override any insulation, equipment or safety barrier. An operator must never remove or damage any label or insulation that indicates an electrical hazard. Before working on any equipment, you must confirm with the person in charge that all safety conditions are met. Similarly, a marker or barrier must never be removed or crossed. When several companies work in close proximity to each other, each work area must be marked or surrounded by barriers so as to prohibit interference. A sign is never a protection, but simply a means of signalling. In order to prevent the risk of falling into a floor opening, for example, it is imperative to install a hard guardrail. Signage is also used to define the work area of each company, and no boundaries should be crossed. Prohibition rule number 2. Rule 2 concerns the use of alcohol or drugs. Never be under the influence of alcohol or narcotics when driving or at work. It is also prohibited to bring, keep, or illicit drugs on the site. Blood alcohol and drug testing may be carried out in accordance with the laws and regulations of companies. Prohibition rule number 3. Never perform tasks for which you are not competent. A worker must never use a tool or equipment unless he is trained or authorised to do so. Examples of training required include the handling of construction equipment, the operation of lifting platforms, the authorisation required for electrical work, crane operation, lifting manoeuvres or height and harness work, as well as the fitting of scaffolding. When it comes to plant or any machinery, the operator must be medically fit, have a training certificate and authorisation from his employer. Electrical work is reserved for persons trained and authorised by their employer. Prohibition rule number 4. Falling objects. Always be aware of the possibility of objects falling in your environment. You must be careful not to drop a tool both during and after work. Never ignore barriers or indications that are in place to secure an area above which work at height is being completed. Prohibition rule number 5. No one should be exposed to a risk of falling from a height. To this end, the use of scaffolding or mobile elevating platforms should be used. In the absence of a barrier, a harness must be used. Scaffolding must be installed by qualified and trained personnel. The regulations also require that it be inspected by a qualified person, which is usually the manufacturer of the equipment. It also must be checked before each use. The checks are shown on a sign posted at the access levels on the scaffold. This panel indicates in particular the permissible loads and whether access is authorised or not. Each company must also designate a competent person who checks daily the condition of the scaffolding and whether it is suitable for the work to be carried out. Under no circumstances should scaffolding elements be dismantled by users. As far as lifting platforms are concerned, the rule of the site is to wear a harness as soon as you climb onto the basket of a MEUP. The use of ladders is forbidden, except in special cases validated by a risk analysis demonstrating that there is no other solution and with the agreement of the site supervisor. A final point concerning the prevention of falls from heights concerns the temporary guardrails placed at the edge of floors under construction or around the openings in the floors. These guardrails must consist of 3 elements, one being between 1 and 1.1 metres, one intermediate rail, and a skirting board 15 centimetres on the base, which must be continuous around the entire edge. Missing guardrails must be reported to a supervisor. Prohibition rule number 6. Lifting. The basic rule is never to go under a suspended load. Every person working on the site must respect the markings and the barriers defining the exclusion zones around lifting areas. You must also follow the instructions of the person responsible for the lifting operation. If a worker sees someone below a suspended load, he must intervene. The rules for lifting are summarised as follows. The crane operator, the slinger and the manoeuvring manager are trained and qualified by the company for this project. The chief of manoeuvre must be identified. The crane and its lifting equipment are up to date with their periodic general inspections. The lifting area is barriered and monitored. No personnel should stand beneath the load. The load must be strapped if possible. The load is guided by a rope. No direct manual contact with the load or slings is permitted. Sanction. There is a system of sanctions that is applied in the event of a breach of the health and safety rules. This system has 4 levels, ranging from a simple verbal warning, a written warning to the company, a temporary exclusion through to a permanent exclusion to the site. The extent of the sanction will be proportionate to the gravity of the offence or the repetition of the offences.